Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dalmar, together with my co-host, Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and as you can see here now, he is a columnist for the Jewish Press.
Right, I have a column called Albany Beat, and it runs every month, and I'm very happy to be a part of this prestigious newspaper. So, with us today is Tim Wiles. He's the executive director of the Guilderland Public Library.
Yep.
So, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mark, we're getting educated here. We have a librarian. Hopefully you have a good book for us.
I have a lot of good books. Anyway, in fact, a couple 100,000.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I know that the Guilderland Library has 201,278 books.
Awesome. I had a really good guess just there, didn't I?
How many books did you read over here, Mark? Now's the real test.
But you know, it's more than just books at a library these days.
It is.
You have 24 museum passes, for what I don't know. We can go into that later.
Sure.
12 fishing rods.
Absolutely. Yep.
Really?
Yep.
I never heard of
I
You
know.
could teach a man to fish, I guess. So
3 study rooms, which is nice. I like. They're quiet rooms. That's where
yes,
you could just go
you
in
can check
and
them out for quiet
yeah.
space. Yep.
Over 7,200 audiobooks,
Absolutely.
which is amazing. More than 9,200 music CDs. Close to 4,000 graphic novels,
Yep.
which I got to go into later because I don't know what you mean by the word graphic.
Okay. Yeah, we'll cover that. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then 900 video games,
Yeah.
which I think the kids don't need, but that's beside the point. Over 19,000 DVDs.
Yep.
And 253 magazines.
Yep.
And you bet you don't have the Jewish Press.
I bet we do, but we'll check.
Jewish
Well, you-
Press, maybe.
Yep. Is this a statewide or a
National.
national? Okay.
National.
Yep. So
So if you
we
don't have it,
should,
we're
yeah.
gonna get that.
We
to
will
you.
figure that out.
Okay, you
yep,
got it.
absolutely, because we should have it.
So anyway, it's a really broad range. The libraries have really expanded their usefulness.
They really have, and I respect that you did that research. But beyond that, one of the speeches I go out and give is called 57 Things You Didn't Know You Could Do at the Guilderland Public Library. So there's language learning software for 57 different languages that you can use either in the library or from your computer at home. One of those languages is English because there's an immigrant population in Guilderland, of course, and there are people who are trying to work on their English.
Well, you said there was 57 different things, so
Right.
each language is
That
one.
is one. There you go. So
Each
and then
language is
there are
57.
56 more as well besides that.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. There are databases you can go online and search.
Right.
For example, consumer reports. Everybody wants to know before you buy a fridge or a Mazda or whatever you're buying. And if you're a registered card holder, you can sit on your couch at home with your iPad and search consumer reports.
And what about genealogy sites?
Lots of genealogy, including, of course, Ancestry.com. And I'm sorry I don't know the name, but a Jewish genealogy ancestry site that we have
Very good.
access to.
Let
as
me
well.
ask you some. Of course, we just say you're from Guilderland. What about other people in other suburbs? Maybe some cities, like even Albany, just doesn't have the resources Guilderland has. Is it locked up just for the people in Guilderland?
It is not. So there are 2 things to tell you there. One is that any library in Albany or Rensselaer County is participating in the same system, the Upper Hudson Library System. So our cards are good at all of those 29 libraries. The other thing is that Guilderland is near to the line between that system and the Schenectady Library System. So we have people from Schenectady, Rotterdam, Duanesburg, et cetera, who would like to use our library but are not in our system. So for those people, we have 2 options. If you live outside of Guilderland or outside of Albany County, but work in Guilderland, we welcome you to get a library card because we believe you contribute to the tax base in Guilderland by coming and doing work, but also by buying lunch, buying gas, those kinds
That's
of
nice.
things. So, and it's something we just started about a month ago, and
Oh.
I'm really glad to be on your program.
Breaking
to
news.
Mention that. The other thing is, if you don't happen to work in Guilderland, you can buy an annual pass to the library, which for your average citizen is $50 a year, but for senior citizens and military veterans is $25 a year, so half of that.
So that's
And what
very
do you have a children's rate?
Children are free for, obviously if you live in Albany and Rensselaer
No,
counties.
if you got to buy a pass, if you have to buy
We haven't been faced with that question because kids typically, until they're of driving age, and one thing about the Guilderland Public Library is it's not particularly walkable. It's on Western Avenue and it's in a It's partially residential there. There are a couple of houses nearby, but
And
it's
there's an
mostly
apartment
business.
complex nearby.
Yeah, apartment complexes, many of them nearby,
Right.
but not quite close enough to comfortably walk, especially in the 6 or so months of winter that we experience around here. So, and no sidewalks yet on that
Right.
portion, although I think that the town of Guilderland would like to do sidewalks in the future.
That'd be great.
So, yeah.
So tell me really about this, the graphic novels.
Graphic novels,
talk
yep.
You're
about
really
that.
interested about
Actually,
that.
the first graphic novel, as I understand it, I'm sure you've heard of. It was the title called Mouse by Art Spiegelman.
Yeah, I did. I read that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a comic book format, an illustrated visual format.
You were saying this one of the
telling a story.
first ones?
I believe it might be the
Really,
first
I didn't know it
one.
was
Yeah,
that
so-
radical over here. First
yep.
time someone showed it to me, Rabbi, you want to read something about the Holocaust? I just flipped through. I saw cartoons. I said, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, the Holocaust is the most serious situation in the world, and you're making a cartoon out of it. And I read it, and it was a really incredible book.
I thought
I
so,
did push
too.
myself to read it. I said, "Wow, this is really great."
So when you say graphic, is it graphic in the content?
It's graphic in the sense that it's told through a combination of pictures
It
and
looks
stories.
like a cartoon
yeah,
book.
Yeah, it's very, very
Yeah,
similar
like a
to a
comic
comic
book.
book,
Yes.
except typically about a more substantial subject, than a comic book. I mean, nothing against
So
comic
that
books.
became a big
So-
thing after he
It did,
started.
yeah,
it?
I think.
I didn't know that.
Now I would have to go back to the internet and verify, but I think Art Spiegelman started that whole movement.
I didn't know
so
that. How do you like that?
Now,
Anyway,
why? Now, museum passes. You have what do you mean you have 24?
what's the theory there? So museums, the capital region is gifted with many wonderful
Right,
museums.
Albany history.
Yep, they are, a gesture to them, they're next door to us here. But they are one of the 24, and it's now 26 museums.
Okay.
Because we just got the Fenimore Art Museum and the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown to join up. But the idea is you check this pass out for 3 days. Most of them are good for 4 admissions, a family full of admissions, 2
really?
adults and 2 kids. And the theory is for the museums that libraries, can do 2 things for them. They can help them build an audience that might not necessarily be driving to the museum this weekend, but if you give them this offer, hey, it's free because you checked it out of your library, that might be just what they need to get them over the line and say, oh yeah, let's go to the Albany Institute, or let's go to the
Really?
Clark Art Museum. So that's one theory.
And you have for Clark in Massachusetts?
We do, yep. Boy, that was tough all summer because of the Van Gogh exhibit, and most of the libraries in the area have these, but
Really?
people were just sort of duking it out. They're like, I want to know the moment that pass comes in.
Most of
anyway.
the libraries have museum passes.
Yes, I believe so. Certainly the large ones like Colony, Albany, East Greenbush.
Bethlehem, I know.
Well, the
Bethlehem,
Albany
sure.
City Library System has several branches.
Right. Yep.
Are they in every
I don't know
branch?
how they do that. They must
Oh.
be in every branch. Yeah. I recently lost a bet with the director of the
Scott?
of the Albany Library because I'm a Cubs fan and he's a Mets fan.
Oh, I'm a Cubs fan too.
Oh,
I know
good.
we have
Okay,
something in common.
We're going to have to
over
do
here.
a whole nother show about
That's
that.
it.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, there's another pair of books written by a rabbi in Chicago. The first one is called "Is God a Cubs Fan?"
Really?
And the second one is called "Is God Still a Cubs Fan?" So, but anyway, and I haven't read them either, but I would like to.
Well, they're going to win the World Series when Mashiach comes.
I think you better wait for that. Talking about baseball, tell me about your background in
Okay.
baseball. You're not just
Yep.
a Cubs fan, which
Nope.
is enough to make you a diehard baseball
There
fan.
you go, and to make me welcome on your show. Before I was at the Guilderland Public Library, I was the director of research at the Library of the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown from 1995 to 2014. And in that role, my job was to coordinate all public and media use of the library. So it was an amazing amount of fun. Nobody should have that much fun and get paid for it, as I had for 20 years. And I missed the place. I was over there this last week. But the opportunity in Guilderland was great because my family had relocated to Guilderland, where my wife is the school superintendent. And it was a tough slog to commute for an hour and 20 minutes or so twice each day for 3.5 years. So when the Guilderland job opened up, I was very happy to throw my hat into the ring and lucky to be selected.
Wow. So you got to get your wife on the show now.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she'd be happy to do it, and I could tell her
was...
exactly how to get here.
That's right.
I'd probably come with her and watch.
That would be great. Okay.
Anyway,
You could always watch her on our Jewish View TV
That's right.
Absolutely,
show.
absolutely.
But so tell us a little bit more baseball. 20 years with baseball over here. You must have some good stories.
I do, and you know, one thing people ask me is, did you get to meet the Hall of Famers? And if a Hall of Famer was alive in 1995 or later, I've met him or her. Although the her I haven't, she wasn't alive. Effa Manley is the only woman in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I didn't get to meet her because she died before I got there. But I've met them all, and there's some lovely gentlemen and some wonderful guys, and obviously some very, very great baseball people. But I actually preferred meeting what are called the cup of coffee guys. And since we're on a show called The Jewish View. Sorry, thank you.
It's right there.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, there's my view.
That's right.
I'll mention that one of my favorite guys that I met was a Jewish player from the 1950s named Lou Limmer. Lou was a first baseman for the Philadelphia Athletics, and when I met him the first time, I frankly hadn't heard of him because there were about 15,000 major league players at that time and so forth, and Lou was not a major player. But I heard his stories, got to have lunch with him and so forth. And then he would come back every couple of years with different family members, and it was just awesome to.
Because he's just like on nostalgia.
He's a baseball-loving guy, much like you and me, and perhaps you, Mark.
Yeah.
So.
And is he living in Philadelphia?
Well, he's now deceased, but he was living in Philadelphia. And speaking of
Philadelphia. Maybe he's still living in Philadelphia underground.
Could be, yep.
Okay.
Depends on your beliefs.
That's right.
But the other, and again, I'm thinking of a lot of Jewish connections because I'm on the show, but the other Jewish gentleman that I met from Philadelphia was the great Max Patkin, the Clown Prince of Baseball. Do you guys know about?
I did read a story about him.
Okay.
They always have a Jewish book of baseball players.
Right.
And it's one of the thinnest books. People kid me, it's the thinnest books probably in the whole library. But
right. Well,
there were a few.
That's not necessarily true, but I know the joke. And now that I'm thinking about it, a third Jewish fellow from Philadelphia who just appeared at our library is the singer-songwriter Chuck Brodsky. And Chuck has been writing what are called folk songs for the last 20, 25 years. He's put out about 15 albums. And I got to tell you this story, if I may. I never had met Chuck. My phone rang one day at the Hall of Fame, and I picked it up, and the guy says, "What do you know about Eddie Klepp?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing. What do you know?" And he says, "Well, Eddie Klepp was the only white man to play in the Negro Leagues for the Cleveland Buckeyes in 1946, which, of course, is the year before Jackie Robinson integrates Major League Baseball." And I said, "Wow, that's fascinating." I said, "I don't know what we have, but I'll get your number. I'll go research him. I'll call you back." So I did that, and I found some information on Eddie Klepp, and who in and of himself wasn't that great a story. It was just basically the fact that the only place he found where he could play was a Negro League team.
Oh, really?
But actually, it was everything. It was segregation in reverse, because the black team would travel around and they'd go to black restaurants and they'd say, we don't serve your kind here. You have to go, and they'd go to black hotels and they'd say, you've got to stay in a different hotel. So it was really a bizarre story, and Chuck wrote a song about it.
And was he Jewish?
So, he was.
Yes,
I don't know, but he might have been. Okay. We'll have to ask Chuck, who would also love to be on your show. So anyway, but he lives in Philly. Or actually lives in North Carolina, but he's from Philly.
People come to our show from all over.
The Philadelphia, the Jewish Museum in Philadelphia, a year or two ago, mounted a tremendous show on the Jewish baseball experience, which was one of the last things I got to work on at the Hall of Fame before I moved on.
Do you happen to know how many Jewish ball players there were?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I would gather at least 200 based on Martin's.
Really, that many? I
was
going to say 10 over here.
No, there were plenty. Based on Martin's card set, and there are several notable players today. Ryan Braun of the Brewers, Ian Kinsler,
Sandy Koufax.
Sandy Koufax, retired, of course, but looks like he could still play.
What about this baseball?
Have you met Sandy?
I have met Sandy Koufax.
Was he a nice guy? What's he
very nice guy. Yep.
So, I went to the same high school as he.
Yeah,
a few years
absolutely.
apart.
You didn't make it to the baseball.
Did you also play basketball? you know?
No.
As Sandy Koufax did, and then went to the University of Cincinnati, I believe, on a basketball scholarship.
But Lafayette High School, if there's a
There you go.
reunion that he's going to be at, I'm going to be there.
You're going to be there,
So.
yep.
But I've been to the Baseball Hall of Fame for Hall of Fame weekend.
Right.
And for the induction ceremonies, and he's always up there on the stage. But I can never get close enough to introduce myself. So
Why so many people surrounding him?
no, it's just they have this separate
Sort of a security moat.
Right, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they shuttle them to the buses, and maybe I remember Reggie Jackson once stopped and talked to a few reporters at the before getting on the bus, but really they just all go on the bus. They go to the Otasaga Hotel where where they're staying for the weekend or whatever, and then they stay secluded. So and the management of the Hall of Fame, they don't want the reporters to be really bothering the Hall of Famers, and it's understandable. So I respect the distance, but I just wish I had that time before he.
Someday you might just magically run into it.
I would love to.
But tell us about this Jewish baseball cards.
Okay, sure, yeah.
That's interesting. I thought there'd be 5 cards in your whole collection.
So there's a great gentleman from Boston named Dr. Martin Abramowitz, who, as you might guess, is Jewish.
Yeah.
And Martin and his son collected baseball cards together, and they tried to get every Jewish player. And of the mainstream Topps and other baseball card companies. Topps, I think, was also founded by a Jewish man, Cy Berger, the late, great Cy Berger. But anyway, there were a few players who had played so briefly that they never were given a Topps baseball card. So Martin and his son were lamenting this fact. And the son, I don't know how old he was at the time, but he said, "Dad, why don't we make our own?" And it had never occurred to Martin to do that. So they began researching it, and they eventually got hooked up with the American Jewish Historical and then C Commission, or maybe S Society, I can't remember, but that organization, national organization. And there was, a few years ago, I believe, a 400th anniversary of Jews in America, or maybe 450th, something like that. So there were a number of things done to commemorate that, and Martin convinced them to, produce this baseball card set that he and his son, wrote and researched the photography and so forth, and they sold it, through probably through the Jewish press and their own, website and so forth. And I got to help with photo research and statistical research and a little bit of biographical research. And so you want to hear about the funny story I have?
All right, there you go.
Okay, I hope it's funny. So the set was very successful and sold out and raised some money for the organization and for the, whatever you call a bicentennial times 2, quadricentennial, I don't know. And so Martin and his son decided, and the organization decided to do an update set the next year. And they did an update set the year after that. And they added new players who were Jewish. And we're sort of in a golden age right now. There have been a number of Jewish players, well over a dozen in the majors right now.
Right now, yeah.
And so they did those updates, but they also did interesting moments. Like they found a moment where the umpire, the batter, and the hitter were all Jewish. And they got a photo of that moment and put that on a card, that sort of thing. So as the card set expanded beyond what we think of just traditional one guy on a card, I said, Martin, I was an expert and am an expert in women in baseball. And I said, we have this great League of Their Own. You're familiar with the movie. And they played in the 40s and 50s. And they had about 700 women play, 4 of whom were Jewish, generally accepted historical fact. So it took me a year or two to convince Martin to include these women. One of his objections, I think, is that league began as a softball league and morphed into a baseball league. So you could argue, was it baseball at any given point?
Oh, I thought he was like observant, where he wanted to keep the men separate from the women.
That may have been the case too. I can't speak for him, but whatever it was, he was a little reluctant at first. And I finally convinced him that adding these 4 cards might add some marketing appeal to the set and so forth. And so he says, okay, get me the info on these 4 ladies. So I do that, and I come up with 3 published, and if we're not in the academic world, but sort of refereed sources that are edited and vetted and so forth. I come up with the sources on these 4 women, and I get him the pictures and the whole bit. And about a week after the card set comes out, one of the women calls him up and demands to have her card removed because she's not Jewish. And it's a situation, you guys would be much more familiar than I, but one parent is Jewish and one is not, and she doesn't identify as Jewish. And so Martin respected her request and pulled that card from circulation. And so I think that I'm inadvertently responsible for what I call the Jewish Hannes Wagner card, because that card of Hannes Wagner from 1909, 1910 is so rare because he had it pulled from circulation, reportedly because he didn't approve of tobacco use. And so those were the only two cards
But it was,
I know.
but it was really because he didn't get an
endorsement.
money for.
Yeah. You can find print ads where he's endorsed 7 other brands of tobacco, but that particular brand didn't pay him. So one of the current theories is that, you got to pay me before you, even back in 1910, when that industry was probably much more in its infancy. I don't know about many 19th century player endorsements. Pro sports wasn't a big thing, in the
Well, I have to tell you something. My cousin, last name Siegel, lives in Ellenville, but he was drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals. And he wanted to be observant. And he just said, baseball's not for the Jews. It's just not a Jewish sport.
Well, you have your Saturday game and your Friday night game.
Well,
right?
also what we've seen with Art Spiegelman and others who they didn't want to play when they didn't want to play on Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
Sandy Koufax, right?
Yep.
He didn't want to play, and there were others who, really just say that they have it conflicts with their religious belief. So it's really my cousin left the Cardinals organization, but I was happy that I met him towards the end of his life when he could tell me that story. But
well, I would have to say, and one of the things I loved about working at the Baseball Hall of Fame is that same conversation we're having about your cousin. I got to have those kinds of conversations with people all the time. And what I would personally say is, I have a lot of respect for your cousin for choosing his faith over that profession. At the same time, you have to kind of wonder what might have been.
That's true.
So it's a pretty glorious career, and a lot of Jewish guys have done very well in baseball, not just as players, by the way, but in every other aspect, umpiring, ownership, media, there's a lot of good. The baseball card guy we mentioned earlier, Cy Berger. Where would we be without him?
If you can't play it, you might as well own the team.
Well, they say if you can't play, you coach.
There you go.
Right? Did you ever hear that?
I've heard that one.
Okay.
How I couldn't play, I became a baseball librarian.
That's right.
It's a pretty limited job field. There's been about 6 or 7 of them in the history of the hall. So.
Wow.
But anyway.
Put your name on the plaque.
I always, when I went to the Hall of Fame, they really, for Hall of Fame weekend, they never had a place for the reporters to store their equipment or whatever. So we used the reference library.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is now named for Bart Giamatti.
Bart Giamatti, the commissioner.
And so right around the time that they named it, I would always every year go into the reference library to put my equipment down.
I guarantee you, we've crossed paths.
We must have.
We've been this far apart before, though we never met. So
good to see you again.
Yeah, that's right. And it's meant to be that I'm here. Thank you so much.
So let me ask you, going back to can I go back to the Guilderland
All
Library?
right, I'd like to talk baseball,
I
but
know
all
you
right.
do,
all right.
but
you can have me back if you'd like.
Yeah, business before pleasure.
We should,
There you
I just wanted to know, what. Well, first of all, this fishing rods thing really has me perplexed. So tell me why you have fishing rods when you're not really near water except the 5 rivers. I mean,
we're
the 3 mile works, by Fuller Road there.
Yeah, there are plenty of places to fish in the area. We have fishing rods. It's a historical thing. There was a club, and it still exists, a club called the Helderberg Bassmasters. And no one knows how long ago, but around 25 years ago, they did 2 things. First, they established a big fishing tournament in the Capital Region for kids that they never turn any kids away from who don't have the $7 or the fishing pole or whatever you need to get in. So they wanted to give our library, and maybe I think Bethlehem has fishing poles too, right. But they gave some libraries some fishing poles to enable kids to fish who didn't have the ability to buy that stuff. And then every few years they would, recondition the poles or buy us some new ones. And it just makes it a very easy way for a parent and a child to sample fishing without making a big investment.
It's very different. The libraries up here and what you offer are very different from what I'm used to at the Brooklyn Public Library.
There you go. Yep.
Now,
you
have
you're
to
going to go
imagine
fishing in Brooklyn over here.
Well, there is fishing, but you worry about things being stolen in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And you worry about security.
Mm-hmm.
Here, you're saying, here, take it, go.
Take it. Yeah, it's free. It's free. I like to call us the store where everything is free when you were talking about all that stuff earlier, But anyway, and then the other theme that plays into that is that libraries lately have been circulating all kinds of unusual items. So one of the things we're about to do is begin circulating folding tables.
Really? How do you
6 foot long folding tables. And the reason is because it's something you need for a garage sale or for a Thanksgiving party or a holiday party, but you don't necessarily want to own it. So we're going to buy 6 of them and circulate them to the people of Guilderland and see how that goes.
This is very interesting because I heard a few people argue when the tax bill comes up, this library, who needs them? Everything's on, everybody has a computer and not everybody, but, people around there. And really this is interesting where, you are, like Mark is trying to note, you're going way beyond just what's a library. You take out a book.
Yeah.
There's so many more things that a library is functioning as.
We feel that we have to diversify the product line in this day and age when there's so much for people and especially kids to do. But besides that, to get to your earlier part of your question, one thing is, yes, almost all of us, first of all, though, there is, economic inequality in our society, and not everybody has, laptops and iPads and internet connections at home and so forth. In fact, I believe only about 3/4 of Americans have a reliable internet connection at home, but most libraries have them. But beyond that, if you Google something, okay, I do, you do the same term, you're going to get 3 different sets of results because my computer has been to different places than your computer has been to, than your computer has been to. Google, there's that saying, and I'm not just picking on Google, but search engines in general, that saying that if you're not paying anything for it, you are the product. So where the IP address of your computer has been, they're aggregating that data, and they're saying, this guy likes to travel, to Tampa every April, which is something I like to do. So now I'm getting ads in my news feed that relate to that, right? So, and the other thing is, companies who wish to sell their products are paying Google to get into those top 10. Most people look at the first screen of Google, maybe the second, maybe the third. So placement, it's like the grocery store. Placement is very, very important. So are you getting the kind of objective information from Google that you would get upstairs here at the Albany Public Library if you and or a librarian were the one filtering your search, as opposed to allowing Google to filter your search? The library profession, we argue that you're not. We feel, and my wife said to me one day, she said, I Googled something at home, and then I forgot what I needed to know, so I Googled it again at work, and I got 2 different sets of results.
Yes.
Why is that? Yeah. And so I had this conversation with her. It's so subtle that it's hard to notice, but if you're searching for information all day, every day, like librarians are, you begin to realize that that's the case.
So in the few minutes we have left, let me just ask you this. You have a saying of what the library card means.
Right.
Tell us what.
Okay, so you did a little research on me. What I think you're getting at is where my old boss used to say with his library card, he'd say, he wouldn't pull it out just yet, but he'd say, I have a handheld electronic device that affords me access to millions of products in all media. And people would say, really, you have a Kindle, you have an iPad? He says, no, I have a library card.
That's and so, that should be a commercial.
Absolutely.
Public service announcement.
Maybe we should make it.
There you go.
So now the other thing I want to ask you is that in the legislature, there's like library assistants. They
the lobby day?
They've declared April 16th Library Assistance Day.
Okay.
So you're away in Tampa then, I guess. So,
perhaps, yeah.
And they also have Library Week, the legislature. And then they have Friends of Library Week. So they've created in the state legislature these different types of ways of honoring libraries.
Which is wonderful.
And they give, and then they have these certificates and proclamations and resolutions. I mean, and have you been party where the Assemblywoman Pat Fahey represents Guilderland, has come to you and given you a certificate or a resolution?
Not exactly a certificate or a resolution, but she did give us a grant for $75,000, which we're using to redo all of our lighting to LED, which will end up cutting our electric bill.
And did you ask where she got the money from?
I did. Yep.
Is it called a member item?
It wasn't in her case a member item. It was more out of a fund that the state has for greening things. So she called and she said, we need 10 green ideas within the next 2 hours. And thankfully we had been working on that concept because some of what you do to green up a building is also done to save money. So we had done a little work on that already and we were ready to respond. And Pat will be at our library on December 9th for a constituent conversation in the evening.
So when if you got these certificates, do you find them frivolous? Do you find them meaningful?
I find, I can see them both ways, to tell you the truth, Mark. It's great to get that kind of recognition from an important body like the legislature of the state of New York, and to know that that body appreciates the work that we do. At the same time, there are things that we could be doing that might mean a little more than a certificate, But in my brief experience, because I've only been a public librarian for 2 years, the certificate usually accompanies, some program you've worked on together. For example, Pat Fahey and I, and also George Amador and I, who also represents our district, have each done heroin prevention and treatment programs at the library.
Heroin with the drug?
The drug, yeah.
Not the female
Yeah. We don't want to prevent heroines with an E, but we do want to prevent heroin without the E.
The drug, yes.
And so and Sheriff Apple has been involved with both of those, I believe. And so we feel like that when you work together closely with your legislators, that good things come out of it, but also ornamental, ceremonial things like plaques and presentations are usually part of that as well.
Right, excellent. You've been a great guest. We have to talk more about the Cubs, so we'll have to invite you back.
I'd love to come back.
You're doing great work. You
Thank
did
you.
great work with baseball, and keep on going with Guilderland, and continue good success.
Yes,
Thank you,
success.
Rabbi, and thank you, Mark. It's great
Nice
to be
have
here.
you here.
Okay, great. I look forward to coming back.